the draft pick that exposed NFL's rigged system shorts, 941 words. For 41 years, the official record said the 1985 NFL Draft's #1 pick came down to a coin flip between two teams that finished dead equal. That's the story they tell. It isn't what happened. The Houston Oilers and the Buffalo Bills didn't land at 2-14 by accident. Someone in that building made sure you'd never learn how they got there. Here's what the league quietly rewrote its own rulebook to bury. In 1985, the NFL still used a tiebreaker nobody talks about anymore. If two teams finished with identical worst records, the top pick wasn't decided by strength of schedule or by who played the harder opponents. It was decided by a coin toss in a hotel conference room with no cameras running. Whoever won got a generational player for free. That year, the prize was Bruce Smith, a defensive end scouts called unstoppable, the kind of talent that reshapes a franchise for a decade. Two organizations wanted him more than they wanted a winning season. And in professional football, wanting to lose is not supposed to be a strategy. It's supposed to be an accusation. Here's the crack in the official version. Both teams were mathematically eliminated from anything meaningful by week 12. Both kept starting healthy players in matchups they had no reason to win, and both kept them on the field until injuries piled up in the fourth quarter. Front office memos surfaced years later showing coaches were told to manage rosters for the offseason, not the scoreboard. That phrase meant something specific inside league circles. It meant, stop trying, but don't let anyone write that down. League officials called it coincidence. Beat writers at the time called it something else, off the record, where it couldn't be printed without a lawsuit attached. The 2-14 finish wasn't the accident the record books describe. It was the target, reached by two franchises walking the same path without ever comparing notes. But if two teams were both quietly tanking toward the same coin flip, that raises an obvious problem. Why would the league let a random toss decide a decision this valuable? A flip is public. A flip looks fair. That's exactly why it survived on paper for so long. It gave the appearance of chance covering a pattern nobody wanted exposed. The obvious explanation that it was just bad luck for two bad teams in the same bad year doesn't hold once you see how deliberately both rosters were shaped that November, week after week, in ways no single game could explain on its own. Something underneath the flip needed protecting. Not the outcome, the method. Here's what actually got buried. League front offices had learned something from the 1985 tiebreaker that they never wanted fans to understand. Tanking didn't require intent that could be proven in an investigation. It only required roster management, injury designations, and depth chart decisions that looked clean individually and devastating together. No general manager ever had to say, lose on purpose. They only had to say, develop the young players and protect our veterans' health, phrases that meant the same thing in practice, but were legally, provably, unimpeachably innocent. The league's competition committee reviewed the 1985 finish internally. That review was never made public. What it found, according to two people close to league operations decades later, was that both franchises had used the same undocumented management for off-season language in separate memos, 3 weeks apart, without any contact between them. That wasn't collusion. It was worse. It meant every team already understood the incentive without anyone teaching it to them. The system rewarded losing so cleanly that two organizations arrived at the identical playbook independently. The league didn't bury a scandal. It buried a lesson every franchise had already learned on its own, that the fastest path to a superstar wasn't drafting well. It was finishing bad enough, quietly enough, that nobody could call it what it was. That's why the coin flip disappeared after 1985. Not because it was unfair, but because it was too honest. It showed the mechanism in the open, a random gesture standing in for a decision two front offices had already rigged through neglect, in front of anyone paying attention. The league replaced it with a weighted lottery system dressed up as reform, presented as a fix for a problem it never actually admitted existed. But the incentive never left. It just got harder to see. Every tank job since 1985, every quiet season where a losing team benches its best players in December and calls it load management, traces back to that hotel room and that coin. The players who lost real games so a franchise could win a future one were never told what their September effort was actually worth to the men signing their paychecks. Some of them found out years later, reading old front office memos in a lawsuit deposition that barely made the papers, buried on a back page next to the box scores. So somewhere, in a box of league documents nobody's supposed to reopen, there's a record of exactly which teams have run that same off-season management play since 1985, and how often, and how many times it's worked. The league has never released it. No reporter has ever forced the question in a press conference and gotten a real answer back. 41 years later, the coin is gone, but the incentive it exposed is still sitting inside every front office in the league, waiting for the right losing season. Ask yourself why a random coin flip from 4 decades ago still needs protecting.